Hello everybody. So in this video we are going to be making what we call in Danish Bløddej, which is just a soft dough. That's literally what it translates to. And yeah, so I'll just show you the mixing process, and then from there I'll show how to make some different pastries. So to start off with, start with 50 grams of yeast, this is fresh active yeast, so it's like literally a pressed block. If you wanted to use dry yeast, you could, and that would be 25 grams. So I put that in there, and then I'll do 100 grams of milk. I use whole milk, but you could also use 2% or probably not skim milk, but you could use other lower fat milk. And 100 grams when it comes to milk and water is the same as milliliters. And then I'm going to do 140 grams of water. And then 1 egg, which is about 50 grams. For an average egg, it's 50 grams for the medium size egg. A small egg would be around 40, and a large egg would be around 60. And in this recipe, because it's a dough, it doesn't matter quite as much because we're doing a single recipe. If we had multiplied it, then it would start to matter whether they're small or large. And then we'll do 2 teaspoons or 8 grams of sugar. And then I'll put in my flour. So I always start with the wet ingredients, and then I put the, and then plus the sugar, and then I do the flour, and then I do the salt and the fat. And that's because yeast doesn't react well with salt, and it doesn't react well with fat. And so then you can actually read more about that on one of my blog posts about yeast. I can add a link in the footnotes of this. But so we'll do 550 grams of flour. Let me fix that really quick if I can. And this is just all-purpose flour. It's about 550 grams. And I'll usually make a little well just to make sure that it stays separated. From there, we'll do 6 grams of salt, or 1 teaspoon. And then 100 grams of butter. You could also use margarine. And you can also use oil, like vegetable oil, olive oil, anything like that. I've done it with both oil and I've done it with butter. and I've also done with margarine, and honestly, I wouldn't say there's too vast of a difference, especially when you're not just eating these straight. Like if you're making them into rolls where they don't have any flavoring but just the bread themselves, you can't really taste a difference. But yeah, there we go. So these ingredients, these are all the ingredients for this recipe. I'm going to now mix it in my mixer on the lowest speed for 6 minutes, and then I'm going to increase the speed to about medium, and I'll do that for 8 minutes, and then I'll show you what the dough looks like after that. Okay, so now we're back from mixing. It's mixed for 6 minutes on low, 8 minutes on medium speed. Now there's a few things that we need to do to check to see if the dough is ready for us to let it just rest. The first thing we need to do is we need to do a gluten window test. And then the second thing we need to do is check the temperature. And I will explain as I go. So, the gluten window test is where we take a piece of the dough and we stretch it out a little bit at a time, and we see if we can see through it like a window. Unfortunately, the camera can't get it very well at that angle, but it's stretching very well. You can kind of see some light through it at that angle. We want to be able to see through it, see light pass through it pretty evenly. So that is good. And then the next thing we want to check for is the temperature of the dough. Now this is actually way more important than you would think. This has been one of the temperature of the dough can make all the difference when it comes to consistency in a recipe. What we want is the temperature of the dough to be at about 24 degrees Celsius. And if it's not, then the yeast inside of it means that the dough is not warm enough for the yeast to be active right away. And then that can be the difference between a 1.5 hour rise and a 30-minute rise. Trust me, I know I've done this at home many times. I've made the mistake of not checking the temperature and a dough recipe that I've used a million times, it takes 3 times longer to raise. Okay, so this is 24.8 degrees Celsius, which is 76.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That is perfect. So now we can let it rest. So it can proof for the first time for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll show you some different things we can do with this dough. Oh, I realized I forgot to say, I'm going to cover this with a tea towel, a doubled over tea towel. If you don't have that, you can also just cover it with plastic and then weigh it down with something, or a lid. It's really up to you. But either way, we don't want a lot of airflow, or there will form a dry crust over the dough. All right, so now this dough has risen. It's rested for about 15-20 minutes. And now I'm gonna put it out on a lightly floured surface. I'm gonna portion it how I want to. So there are you can choose different ways, different things to make with this dough. You can make Danish cinnamon rolls, which are called Maggie-Nielson-Huelke. I'll try to put some pictures up of each of these. You can do what I call Danish cinnamon braids, and those are called kanelstinger. You can also just make a classic Danish roll, and those are called teboller. It's like a tea bun. But yeah, I mean, those are the recipes. Oh, you can also make what's called a kanelsnor. That's it's like a twist. But yeah, there's many different things you can make. Over time, I'll have videos of all of those, and I'll probably put together video compilations where it shows making the dough and then also the formation of it. So this is about a kilo, not quite. So I'm gonna portion this into 3 different sizes for the sake of this video. And then I'll stop the video because I'll need to show the difference. I'll have different videos showing the different pastries. So for the first piece, I want it to be about 500 grams. And that's gonna be for this 500 gram one, it's gonna be for my cinnamon rolls. And this other piece, which should weigh about 500 grams, which it does, I'm gonna section into 2 pieces, and that is 250 grams is what I want that to be. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to shape these into logs and set them to rest again. But they don't need to rest for very long. They can rest for maybe like 5 minutes. But I just shape them into a log and set them aside. Doesn't need to be anything pretty. We just want to knock some of that CO2 out of them. That develops as the yeast causes the dough to raise. And now I will cover those for about 5-10 minutes. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to make these different pastries.